Welcome to season 2 of Disruptive Conversations. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be with you to ring in this new year and to set ourselves up with awareness, intention, clarity, and a willingness to look at what's happening inside and outside of us so that we're able to show up for our lives in this new year in an impactful and important way for ourselves and for those around us. So I'm delighted to have on Caroline Welch as my first guest of the new year. And if you haven't come on before, please welcome. And here we go. Caroline's coming on already. There's important information that gets dropped all the time, and I wouldn't want you to miss it. If you know someone who would be helped by this, indeed. And here we have Caroline. Without further ado, so Caroline, first I'm going to introduce the show, and then I'm going to introduce you. And my setup is a little bit funny today, so I'm just going to move us a little tiny bit higher. I'm trying something a little bit different, and with that is always, nope, wrong way. This is the beauty of Instagram Live. So in any case, welcome everyone to Disruptive Conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, innovators, authors, educators, in which we deep dive into the experiences these women have needed to navigate and conquer in order to achieve their personal and professional success. And we can't have change and we can't have success without disruption. I'm Dr. Risa Reiger, clinical psychologist, and I'm an expert in change. And one of the things that we know for sure is that positive change can happen at any point, and that's the great news. In order to make change, we need to disrupt. We need to disrupt a thought, a feeling, a belief, a behavior, a habit in order to create our 10.0 lives. And that's what this series of conversations is all about. And that also is why I have the guests that I have chosen and have been gracious and generous enough to come on, which is to help us in that journey of creating that life. And so now I'd like to introduce my first guest of the new year of season 2, Caroline Welch. And here, let me tell you just a tiny little bit about her because there's so much to say. Caroline comes from a background of almost endless incarnation and pivots and additions to who she is, what she's done, and what she's experienced, and what she's teaching and showing us in the world. So Caroline has been and is, because we are always these things, an attorney, a CEO, a co-founder of the Mindsight Institute, an author, a mediator, a world traveler, an avid hiker in places that are really quite astonishing. In addition to that, Caroline has a life partner husband and 2 wonderful, amazing children, and the newest dog that was a rescue from California. And so without further ado, I introduce Caroline. So Caroline, of all the things that I've said about you so far, what is it that I haven't said?
I think you did a very comprehensive review. And one of the things I love about what you said is to really convey the idea and feeling that we are all dynamic. I'm not the same now as I was last year, nor are you, nor is anyone here with us today. And I think there's so much power in recognizing that. I'm not stuck. I am continuing to evolve and find my interests and find my way.
That's an incredible place to start, because we don't, we're additive, and we don't have to be a this or a that, and typically we're not. And when we're really able to embrace that, it opens up a whole other dimension. So we can go off on this and just go from here. But I do want to ask you, and very importantly, given all that you have done, do, and will continue to do, and do, feel, think of, meditate on, become aware of, what have you needed to disrupt inside of yourself in order to have achieved the personal and professional success that you have at this point in time? Because we do know that that will continue to evolve.
That's a great question, and I want to add that I'm also intrigued by the name of your program, the Disruptive Conversations, because I was very curious about that. And what I would say to your question is that the disruption occurred for me when I wasn't satisfied with my life, and that happened pretty early. I grew up on a dairy farm, and some people say often, oh, ideal life. And it was. I had horses, chickens, lots of space, but I learned later that I'm really more of an urban person. So my first mission was to get off the dairy farm. So that happened when I applied for an overseas program, and I had only the opportunity to check two boxes, Northern Hemisphere or Southern. I checked Northern, and then there was a comment box, and I said, I would like to go to somewhere unusual. And so I can only imagine the persons in New York who are screening all of these high school applications, trying to place students with families, and they're like, who are we going to send to Shiraz, Iran? And bingo, it's me. I'm the oldest of four. I'm on a dairy farm. I want to go somewhere unusual. They must have been ecstatic when they put this match together. And in fact, it was a great match. I start with that story because I think in general, as we all would agree, we don't like change. We get comfortable. We like our routines. And so typically changes occur when we have to make them, unless we're so in touch with ourselves that we know something's amiss and I want something different. I don't know what I want, but I want to do something else, a little pivoting.
So even at this moment, and we haven't gotten past that point in your life, but it says something about who you are and who you were at that point in time, and that you, given that you were on a dairy farm, there was just so much of the world that you were exposed to. What do you think it was inside of you that wanted something so different, rather than just thinking, well, any place but the dairy farm would be fine, that you went to a whole other level and conceptualization of change and experience?
It would be a combination of things, but what would percolate to the top to answer that question would be curiosity. And when I combine that with the disruptive part of this, what I had to disrupt was that I lived in a very rural environment, and my parents had never even been on an airplane, and we didn't take vacations because we had dairy cows. Mm-hmm. So, but that was the life. I mean, I had 38 cousins there, and they all lived on farms. And I still have cousins who are farming. So people around me weren't doing anything in particular that inspired me to go do something, but I think it was just my own, what else is there? And breaking out, like I don't really aspire to stay on the farm, that kind of thing. And I think that's really hard for all of us as we go through the different chapters of our lives, because if the ecosystem around us is a certain way, at some point we may not be a good mix for that, whether it's moving to another place or having a different career or a different position or mixing up something in our families. I mean, it's all about the change.
Yeah. So that was major pivot, major disruption one. What else would you like to let us know about some other disruptions or pivots?
Yeah, we're not going to move very far. I mean, that was high school. Then if we go to college, another one happened. As the first in my family to go to college, my parents wouldn't allow. I grew up, as I mentioned, in southern Wisconsin, and I wasn't allowed to go to Madison because that was too rowdy and too dangerous. So I went to a smaller campus of the University of Wisconsin in the north called Eau Claire. And so after 2 years there, I was looking around where I want to transfer. And then I saw that my college had an exchange program with Grambling University, historically Black college in Grambling, Louisiana. So I was very curious about that. I was in a very white world, and I was excited to apply for that program. And so I spent a semester at Grambling. I was one of 4 whites on campus, 4,000 Blacks. And so that, again, I learned and saw and felt things that I didn't imagine possible. And so that was another situation. I didn't know exactly what it would be, but I knew I didn't know anything about it, so I'm all in.
Okay, so just as a takeaway to our communities who are listening to this is that the importance of giving yourself the gift and of curiosity, and trusting your curiosity, really listening to that curiosity and experiencing what that can be like when you follow through, even if you're not going to Iran to do that. You don't have to travel that far to follow your curiosity, but the importance of following that voice inside you.
Right, and that's I think that's a core and a key. And the thing that I'll add is that as irrelevant as these experiences seem when you have them, like I thought, what will I do with the small amount of Farsi that I know, or knowing about Iran, or what will I do having gone to Grambling? You know, how will that fit when I go back home? And I think it was interesting to me with the murder of George Floyd. I, like so many of us, started to examine my own relationship to being anti-racist. And I feel that I picked up a conversation at that time that I hadn't had with myself since the 70s in Louisiana about racism in this country. And if I thought about myself being racist, I'd say, how can I be racist? I went to a historically Black college, and I never took the steps to be anti-racist and never looked at that again. But I just think we all have these fields of things we've planted, and we can harvest them at any time. And it's just such an exciting unfolding that goes on our entire lifetimes.
And what you're saying also is that even if you don't know how something is going to be helpful to you, it becomes part of your experience, right? And shapes something about how you think, how you experience, what your lens can be on the world, and that whatever you've experienced is not for nothing.
Correct. And I like what you're saying about the don't know part, because with the neural aversion that we have when we're about to make a change, the studies tell us that what we think we're moving to or trying out has to be twice as good or beneficial as our current situation. So when you throw that into trying to power ourselves to make that dive, especially into something we have no idea what it might be like, it does take a certain amount of our own connectedness to our deepest North Star.
Mm. North Star. I mean, we could go off on that one as well. Uh, so what I'm hearing also is the importance of being present with yourself.
100%. I think the presence, or what I refer to in my book as mindful awareness or mindfulness, these are all synonyms, that is the foundation for everything that we're talking about.
And particularly we're in a new year, just a couple of days in, which is so exciting for me to have you here and for us to be together now, is that we get a chance to talk about and pull out, put information out into the world about being present and why that could be important, really what that means. Why should you bother with it? And even though we hear the expression a lot of being present for your own life, Caroline, what does that really mean?
That's the question that I addressed in my book, and that I asked each of the 100 women whom I interviewed for my book, The Gift of Presence. And I asked them what mindfulness means to them. And many of them would say, I don't even know why you're interviewing me for a book on mindfulness. I am the least mindful person in the world. You should just put your laptop away. And as I went through their day, I heard examples of their being mindful and being present. For example, one single mom told me that she comes home from work and goes into her apartment, and she has a teenage daughter. Before she enters, she feels her hand on the doorknob and just makes that transition from the work world, the commute, and now family time. But even before that, I hear that before she finds her daughter in the apartment, wherever she may be, she goes to her room, changes her clothes, and takes a few more moments for herself. And then she's ready to, connect with her daughter and see how the day was and all of that. And I just use this story because one of the most important things, and I heard this from John Kabat-Zinn, and it has never left me, it is that the informal moments of mindful awareness are as important as the formal. I think when we started to become more aware of the power of mindfulness, we associated it with sitting in our most favorite, most peaceful gardens and on a zabuton meditating. And while that is important, and it's the formal side, equally as important is being awake for as many moments as possible.
And that's available to each and every one of us. And also, we may be experiencing that during the day, just as we're going through, but not acknowledging it enough and not saying, kind of calling it out, putting a highlighter underneath it so that we're able to pull it from background into foreground for ourselves.
Right. And I think what you're talking about, Dr. Risa, and I love that, Dr. Risa, is that what keeps us on autopilot half the time are thought loops that are occurring in the midline circuits of the brain, and they're mostly reruns. And to the extent that we can catch ourselves in one of those moments or split seconds and have a sensory experience and activate these side circuits of our brain, then that story, that rerun shuts down, because those two things can't exist at once. If I'm here on Insta with you, fully present, I can't be in my scenario about my terrible neighbor. That's gone. I'm with you 100%. And so the more of those moments that we have, the more we lay down those tracks, the more our baseline way of being becomes that more spacious, calm, clear place.
So it's something that requires practice, and and the thing is that, and this is such a wonderful point that you bring out, which is that we're doing it anyway. We're doing it anyway. We just need to have awareness to acknowledge it and know when it is happening so we can have that for ourselves. It's not like we have to bring in something foreign that we've never done.
Right. And I think that in interviewing the women, I learned as much from them as I did from everything I researched, to hear how this unfolds in our lives and how important it is, and how we need to give ourselves credit. Another woman, for example, who visits her elderly mother, was saying when she does that drive, which is 20 minutes from her house to visit her mother, she feels her hands on the steering wheel. So we have to, of course, remember to be with the car and be in the environment, but that's really the hard part, is doing it, remembering to do it, bringing ourselves back. Because if you're like me, when you're driving in particular, you have a nice mind-wandering session, but the real challenge is to, as much as we can, bring it back to the present moment.
So Caroline, here you were. If I could picture either, I could picture you with one hat. There's a children's book where there's one hat on top of the other, many, many hats going up, or a hat that is one hat, but that has, that's an extraordinary patchwork. And so at this point, you know, you're the CEO, an author, attorney, because that's part of your training. It's how your brain works, and you know how to do this, a mediator and a mom, as well as being a partner, a sister, a dear friend. How do you make this all work? I don't have a better question to ask than that.
Well, that's a pretty big question.
It is, yeah. But
Well,
I know that you're the right person for the question, because you do it. You do it and live it.
I would say that, first of all, I can't get past the image that you drew of each of us with many hats on our heads. I love that. I can see all the hats. And I'd start by saying, I love all those hats. We all need them all the roles we play. It is a part of what makes our mosaics so dynamic. As for how to make it work, I think part of that requires redefining what work is and what success is. And so that's a work in progress always. That whatever the societal or cultural measures might be, maybe some of those don't work for me. And so it's important, I think, to figure out what works, and to, for example, recognize balance. I mean, my whole book, it was inspired. I mean, I suppose it was percolating, but what really gelled what I would write about is, I was running through the airport one day, and I just saw a large exercise ball with an elephant teetering on it. And the caption was, "Forget balance." And I thought, wow, I love that, because I'm always running to balance everything: work, family, volunteering, all the things that we all try to balance. And I think once we can free ourselves of that word and recognize, well, wait a minute, this was not a very balanced day. I'm on a business trip. I worked 10 hours today, or vice versa. I was caregiving most of this day. But what we have to do is give ourselves a break and look at the time frames longer. Look at a week, look at a month, look at 6 months or a year. And in that time, are you, to the best of your ability, coming forth as your most resilient self, and being the person in the workspace you want to be, or being the volunteer you want to be, or being aware of whatever stage your adult kids are in, or whatever those things are as they come along? Do you have the time? Are you taking it? to show up in the way you'd like to show up. And if you are, then I'd say you're nailing it. It's working.
I love that so much. And I think one of the things that happens with women, and perhaps more now with men also, I don't want to leave them out of the equation because they're important in life as well, but it's been typically as a, kind of the gendered, traditional gendered feminine, that we don't put ourselves on the calendar. We don't put ourselves as part of our to-do list. And could you give us some tips, some advice, thoughts about how to go about doing that? What you've learned, or what you've learned from all the women that you've interviewed from, and I'm going to say this book, which I conveniently have it here. I do want to point out that I'm very thrilled to not have a pristine book that I am holding up. That this book has coffee stains on it. It has stuff sticking out of the top. I can't even show you what the inside looks like. Use your imagination. So how do we put ourselves in and on our own agenda?
Great question. And I think we all work on that every day. And the thing we're working against is that I think as women, we likely have been brought up to serve, think of others. Self-care is selfish. We know caregiving in this country, for example, is largely on the hands of women, and even for in-laws, not just our own parents. And so these are messages we got, whether it's preparing meals, caregiving, wearing all of these roles. That was another question I asked all of the interviewees, and they had roles like doing the work no one else will do, driver, mediator. These are all things that we take on. And so I think it's important when we look at our day, okay, where do I restore myself? Where are my friends? I have to not let this moment go without saying that one of the top 5 regrets of the dying is that we have let friendships dormant. And what I want to just say on a personal note is that you have become Dr. Risa since I knew you, and I first met you 50 years ago. I don't want to shock anyone here because I know we look 30, but I want to say that taking time for your friends and taking time for what it is you need to show up as your most resilient self, that's an investment in everyone around you. And I just can't encourage everyone listening to make sure every day you have at least one thing, one space that's for you.
Thank you so much for that. And that it's not gratuitous. It's not that you come after I get everything else done.
Right.
After I buy the potatoes, right? And this is something that happens with people that I work with. It's like, wait a minute, you're buying potatoes has a higher priority than you and then we're not talking about taking 3 hours to go take a bath, but it's 5 minutes, 5 minutes, a few minutes, 10 minutes, whatever that may be, that you can be on your own agenda. And so what you're talking about, particularly with connection and the importance of connection and friendship, it's everything.
Right. And with the loneliness epidemic in our country, yes, we are all becoming more aware of the importance of our connections.
And it's not gratuitous. It's not, if you happen to, by the way, and you know this, and I know this, but just clearly state that it has an incredibly positive effect on your health. Exactly. It is part of health and wellness. If you think that going and taking a walk is a great thing to do, which it is, also being in touch with someone is also a critical and crucial thing to do for your own wellness. So Caroline, of the many, I can't even begin. What's your next disruption as we come to an end? What is your next disruption?
My next disruption is to decide whether or not I would like to write another book. Knowing how all-consuming that is, I have to start mulling that over. But I have a topic, and I'm excited, so we'll see. It is, you've heard the expression, it comes with age. And I would like to turn that on its head, because usually when you hear that, it's about something negative. But I would like to emphasize the wisdom, the ability to communicate, the long-time friendships that come with age.
So as it is part of your brilliance and your genius is taking something and finding this other entry point. It's like having a kaleidoscope or a crystal where you look at something from a different facet. And when you do that, you bring more people in.
Yes, that's the idea.
Beautiful. So we're going to take our coverage. First of all, everyone, do not fear if you have missed any part of this Instagram Live. We hold it, we keep it. Caroline is a collaborator on it. She'll have it available. I'm going to have it available. And so for the people you know who really do need to hear this to start their new year with presence, curiosity, and being aware and living the moments of your life, please do remember to share it with them. And we're going to do our cover shot now so everyone can find us. So I'm a little hair toss. Okay. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. We're going to do two. This is the first one. And one more. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and continuing to join us. Remember, positive change can happen at any point in your life. Be present for you. And if you haven't read it, give yourself this gift.
Thank you.
Yes.